Hey guys, thanks for joining me. Today we're going to look at a brand new model power station from Bluetti. This is their Elite 200 version 2, and it is basically a supposedly significantly upgraded version of the AC200P, which was their first power station that started using lithium iron phosphate battery chemistry, and pretty much all of them do now, as you probably are aware. So this is an 1800 watt continuous output rated AC inverter, and it's got a battery capacity of just a hair under 2100 watt hours. I think it's officially 2073 point something watt hours. So let's just call it a little over 2000 watt hours. And it is apparently roughly dimensioned in size to something that is about half the capacity. So somehow they have managed to squeeze that 2000 watt hours capacity into a bit of a smaller package. But let's get this thing out of the box and see what it comes with. All right, so typical user guide, warranty card, all that sort of jazz. And let's see what's in the box. Got a nice heavy AC cable, probably for some decent fast charging. We have got an XT60 to MC4. Now this is a split MC4, so it looks like there are probably two PV channels. So there's a DC input 1 or PV1 and a PV2. Kind of similar to their AC300 and AC500 series, but with an XT60 connector on it. So no car charging cable, which honestly, who's trying to charge a 2000 watt hour power station through a car charger, a 12 volt car charger port? I mean, it would literally take you 20 hours to fully charge something like that with that capacity. So, but that is an option. I'm sure they do sell that cable, and I'm sure they're readily available on Amazon from a variety of vendors as well, if that's something that you wanted to do. And of course, I'm sure this can be DC charged through an alternator DC charger, like the Bluetti Charger 1, which I hopefully will be doing a review on here pretty soon. And there are a couple other brands that I've talked about that I've done videos on. You can search those on the channel if you want to go check and see what those are all about. But let's get the actual guy out of the box. I think I'll move it down here. This weighs in at about 53 pounds, plus or minus. And so it definitely does not weigh as little as a 1 kilowatt hour battery or power station. It definitely weighs like a 2000 watt hour power station, even if it might even be a little bit smaller. So yeah, that is not much bigger than say the AC180. Let me zoom you in here and show you what it's got on it. So let's go ahead and power it up and see what kind of state of charge it shipped with. Right down the middle, 55%. Like a quick press for DC, quick press for AC. So you've got two USB-A 15 watts, so these are quick charge USB-As. Then you've got two PD100 USB-Cs. I guess if I'm being honest, at this point I would like more Cs than As, although a 50-50 mix isn't bad. And it would be nice in a brand new unit if they were supporting, say, the 140 watt standard for these type Cs. But 100 watt is good enough to charge a laptop in pretty short order. Anyway, here's your DC input for either car charging, DC direct charging, or your solar. And that is 1000 watts of solar max at a voltage range of 12 to 60 volts. So it'll cap you at 20 amps. So typical 12 volt, 10 amp car socket here. You've got four 20 amp max AC output 3-prong terminals. Over here on the side, we have got a grounding, threaded grounding socket there, or to put a grounding screw. There's your AC charging input. There's a little surge circuit protector breaker reset. Nothing really on the back except for the specs, some serial number, model number type stuff. And nothing on this side except some vents. It does not appear that there's any wireless charging on this guy. And there does not appear to be an area light. So those are two things that are minor things, but they are absent in this particular model. And by the way, this is supposed to be using true EV automotive grade lithium iron phosphate cells. And the rating on that typically is that it'll maintain 80% of its original capacity up to about 3,000 cycles. Now on this one, because of the quality of cells that they're using, this one is actually rated for 6,000 full discharge and charge cycles and still maintaining 80% of its original capacity. So that is pretty impressive. That is very impressive. So very long service life on this Elite 200 V2. Now I also noticed there does not seem to be a battery expansion port on that. So if there does appear to be a battery expansion that I find out later on, I'll update you. But as of this point, I would have to say probably not. So let's get this thing fully charged up and run it through the paces and find out if it's something you might want to consider. All right, let's do an AC discharge usable capacity test and see how many watt hours we can actually get through this AC inverter. And this is, again, rated for 2073.6, apparently, watt hours. We know we're not going to get that through the AC inverter, so let's hook a load up to that and find out how we're going to do. So let's turn the AC inverter on. And then we'll first check and see what kind of voltage we're getting. So we're getting a full 120 volts, and we are actually applying a load right now. That is starting to count up. And let's go ahead and set that back to watt hours. And we will let this run all the way down. This is probably going to pull a load of, I think we're about 1,000 watts or so. Actually, I can probably dial that down a little bit. But yeah, let's let this run all the way down until the BMS cuts it off. We'll find out how many watt hours we actually get through that AC inverter. All right, our AC discharge capacity test is done. Let's plug the watt meter into a power source and find out how many watt hours we actually got. Wow, okay, so 2,030 watt hours. That's out of a rated 2,073.6 watt hours. That is got to be a record high. That comes out to like 97.8%. I don't think I've ever seen another power station produce almost 98% of rated capacity out of the AC inverter. So I'm kind of wondering what other tricks this Elite 200 has up its sleeve, because that is a phenomenal number. All right, let's do a DC discharge test to find out how much capacity we can get through the DC port. Now there really is only one DC output, a standard 12 volt 10 amp car socket. So I've got my tester set to 10 amps. Let me go ahead and turn on the DC output here. We are reading 13.42 volts. You go ahead and start the test and see if it'll hold 10 amps. All right, we are holding 10 amps solid, pulling about 134 watts. This is going to take a while. In fact, the estimator there shows 15.4 hours for this test to run, because this is a massive 2,000 watt plus watt hour capacity. So this relatively low watt draw over such a long period of time is definitely going to be impacted by the sort of the normal parasitic draw of just leaving the unit in an on position like that. So the numbers we get should be pretty representative of what you can realistically expect to get out of that DC port in terms of watt hour capacity. All right, looks like our DC discharge capacity test is done. Let's take a look at the numbers. Let me zoom in here. And you can see we got, well, let's call it 1,700, so 1,699.7, so roughly 1,700 watt hours. That's a much lower number than that 2,030 we got out of the AC inverter. But again, I would attribute that to the fact that I was pulling about 1,000 watt load through the AC inverter, so we only ran about 2 hours. This was only pulling about 130 watts or so and ran over 15 hours. So that difference in runtime will lower this number for sure. But even still, that 1,700 watt hours is still about 82% of rated capacity, which is right in the middle of average in terms of comparisons to other power stations that I've run with this same test. So decent numbers, acceptable numbers out of the usable output from the DC side. Let's get this thing charged back up and we'll see what else we can do to it. All right, I normally don't show this test. I usually just describe it, but I thought it might be interesting just to show you. So I've turned on the AC inverter. We're at 100%. Currently 1:15 in the afternoon. We're going to come back in exactly 4 hours and find out how much capacity we have left with no load being applied. So we call that the no load draw, or sometimes referred to the parasitic draw. It's basically what the AC inverter requires, is a continuous power consumption, whether it's loaded or not, as long as it's turned on. So we'll check back in 4 hours and find out how much capacity we've actually lost. All right, it has been a full 4 hours and we have only dropped 1%. So if you do the math on that, you multiply what is it, 2073 watt hours by 0.01 for 1%, and then you divide that by 4 hours, you get about a little over 5 watts. So this is one of the most efficient no-load draws I have seen on an inverter. And that is all the more remarkable when you consider this is a 2600 watt AC inverter. So usually the larger the inverter capacity, the higher the no-load draw. But that is not the case in this particular case. So extremely impressed with this Elite 200. Okay, let's find out how noisy this AC output is, whether or not there's a lot of harmonic distortion. So I've currently got my old crotchety guitar amp hooked up here, plugged into grid power back here. It's not really grid power, but it is through a clean inverter. And let's just get a baseline test and see how it sounds. So there still is a prominent buzz there, and that is typical of this old guitar amp. Let's see if we get noisier output or quieter output, or maybe basically the same from the AC inverter on this Elite 200. So I've already got the inverter on. Let's rerun the test. All right, I didn't really hear a difference between the AC output versus grid output in terms of the noise being passed through into this old guitar amp. So I think something like this Elite 200 would be fine for either like a ham radio application or a remote amplification or PA system. So should be perfectly suitable for something like that. All right, let's do some load testing on this massive 2600 watt continuous rated AC inverter. You can see I'm currently pulling 2400 watts, and I've got all 4 of those AC outlets going. 3 of those are space heaters. 1 is a variable charging speed power station. Let's see if we can dial that up a little bit and get very close to that 2600 watt max. And we are just a hair under that. Let's go ahead and start that 10-minute timer and see if we can run a full 10 minutes. It has been a full 10 minutes, so no problem with that. The volume, even at max load, never exceeded about 54 decibels. So this is an extremely quiet unit. Okay, let's see what happens if we push this thing a little beyond that 2600 and see if it gives us any headroom. Let's try taking it up 100 watts. It's been about 15 seconds. No indication that we are in an overload state, and we are 70 watts overrated. You can hear the fan starting to kick up just a little. That's fairly impressive headroom. And I think one of my heater elements one of my oil heaters just cut off because it's getting very warm in this room. So I may have to move it outside so it gets a little bit cooler air. All right, we are back to just about 50 watts over the max rated. Let's try taking it up another 100 watts. See if we can trip that overload. It's been another 15 seconds and we are 136 watts over that 2600 watt rating. Still going. No indication that we're in an overload state. All right, let's see if we can push it a little further. This next jump is going to take us another 150 watts. This is probably going to trip something. 2875. You can hear the fans ramp up just a little bit. Kind of surprised we're not getting an overload message at this point. All right, it's been a solid minute now, and we are 270 watts overrated. There, it finally just tripped. And now we've got an overload message over here. That is very impressive. That took quite a while to trip. So this thing can definitely handle max load of 2600 and then some. So very impressive load performance on this AC inverter. All right, I've removed a little bit of the load here. Let's just see how easy it is to reset. Looks like simply turning off the AC inverter and turning it back on. and we are counting back up. So very simple to reset the AC inverter in case of an overload. So that's nice as well. All right, let's do a solar test on this Elite 200, and specifically we're gonna see if this thing will resume solar charging in the morning all on its own when the sun comes up without me having to do anything. And I did run this thing all the way down, so we are at 0% state of charge. I'm just gonna go ahead and turn that off. And the solar input is over here, and as you can see, it says 12 volts to 60 volts at a maximum of 20 amps. Now I have 800 watts, and it has a maximum cap there of 1,000 watts. I've got 800 watts connected right now in a 2S 2P configuration. So those 4 200 watt solar panels I have out there have a voltage open circuit of about 23 volts. So probably closer to 20 volts for the maximum power point. So basically I'm combining two pairs in series, so two 40 volt series strings in parallel. So the total system voltage should remain at 40 volts or thereabouts, no more than 46 volts, well under my 60 volt cap. And then the current, short circuit current on that is about 12 amps, and the current maximum power point is about 11 amps. So that will double with the parallel connection and give me right at about 20 amps. So I should get approximately, maybe slightly under that full 800 watts, provided the weather cooperates, of course. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this in, and it is late at night, 9 o'clock at night, pitch dark out. Not going to pick up anything here. Let's just see if this thing will detect the voltage in the morning, detect the current, and start charging. So we'll check back in the morning and see if it's a success or not. All right, it is the next day, about 11 o'clock in the morning. I think this thing completely is shut down. Doesn't appear, normally you would see the display on. Let me just see what happens if I were to unplug and replug the solar cable. And it does wake up, and it will start charging. So that's something to be aware of with this unit. Apparently it doesn't auto wake itself up if the cable is in there while there is no power. So you do need to manually plug the cable in, or just wait until the morning and then plug the cable in once there's a little bit of daylight, and then it will start charging. So the 800 watts I've got connected right now, you can see we're pulling, looks like it's counting up just under 500 watts. And that should be more than sufficient to top this thing off today in a full day of decent sky conditions. So yeah, the 1,000 watt solar limit on there is enough to, if in ideal conditions, to top this thing off in just a couple of hours. But I think under normal conditions, like with what I have here, I got partly cloudy skies, kind of puffy clouds. I think we're going to top this thing off in about 3.5 to 4 hours of charge time. So we shall see. All right, we are nearing the end of the day. We're still getting some decent sun, but that's going to taper off very quickly. So we got to basically 100%. So yeah, so solar input capacity on this definitely suitable to fully recharge this unit in less than one full day of sun. All right, let's test the UPS mode. Now, Bluetti says that this has a switchover time of 15 milliseconds or less when it switches over from grid or solar to battery power. And right now we are connected to the grid here on the right-hand side. And I've got my computer system, including the widescreen monitor, all connected through a little outlet strip on this cable here coming out of the AC inverter. So you can see we are outputting just under 500 watts, and I'm currently charging via AC at about 1,000 watts. So we're going to simulate a power outage with a fairly intensive graphical game being loaded by pulling the power over here and see if the computer stays running or not with this kind of an intense load on it. So let's find out if that works. So here we go. Simulating the power outage in 3, 2, 1. All right, notice the grid icon went away. We're no longer charging. We are still outputting 472 watts. Not so much as a blip on the computer screen. So UPS test, definite pass. And I will point out that in the app, you can actually set the UPS mode. And by default, it's set to standard, which is typical grid connected UPS mode. If you have solar connected at the same time, because it does support dual charging, it will prioritize solar, but you can also set it to other modes, UPS modes as well, where you can configure things like charging only in a specific time window and discharging in a different specific time window. So you might charge when electricity rates are low, discharge when electricity rates are high, and you can kind of set all of that and play with those different options to your heart's content. So a lot of different configuration options on this Elite 200, things that you normally find only on the much more expensive units. Okay, so let's recap with some final thoughts on this new offering from Bluetti. I have to admit that when I first heard they were going to name this product with the word Elite, I was kind of expecting it to be a little bit of a kind of a marketing hype thing, but after seeing just the crazy efficiency of the AC inverter on this thing, and not coincidentally getting that eye-popping record high 97% usable capacity number on my AC capacity test, I'm now a believer. Clearly this is not just marketing hype. And I've been kind of racking my brain trying to come up with some things that I could reasonably point out as design weaknesses or something. And really the only thing that I can mention is the fairly minor annoyance of having to manually plug in that solar panel connection once the sun comes up to get it to start charging. And I suspect for most people that's probably a complete non-issue, but I suppose if you were going to be patching this into a permanently mounted solar source for days at a time, I could see where that could be a nuisance, and for some people that it might actually be a deal breaker. But beyond that, I've really got nothing to complain about. You know, maybe the lack of battery expansion port is maybe one other thing that I could think of. But I think they've actually properly, intentionally positioned this Elite 200 V2 to be an extremely capable, high output, but very compact portable power station all by itself with no add-ons really necessary. I mean, everything that it does, I think it does extremely well. And think about that 97% usable AC capacity for a second as an example. I got 2,030 watt hours usable out of this unit, and the average usable capacity that I've tested among other power stations is around 82%. So that 2,030 watt hours of usable capacity would be what you would typically expect to get from a power station that's rated for nearly 2,500 watt hours. So it's kind of like you're getting a rated 2,500 watt hour power station that somehow manages to take up about as much space as your typical 1,024 watt hour power station. And you're still getting that 2,600 watt beast of an AC inverter that somehow only consumes around 5 watts continuous power. Now, you may be justifiably concerned about just how much they probably want for this thing, given its, elite performance specs. But once again, I think I have to admit that I was a little bit surprised to learn that the launch sale pricing for this unit is just $1,099, which is definitely in the budget priced territory at just about 53 cents per watt hour, and that's rated watt hours. So realistically, given that crazy high 97% usable capacity performance that we actually get out of this thing, it's actually priced better than just about anything else you'll find with the rated capacity in that 2 kilowatt hour class. And let's not forget that it does come with a 5-year warranty and an industry-leading 6,000 plus cycle rating, which should equate to something like a 17-year design life. So yeah, if I seem a little hyped on this unit, it's because I'm truly impressed. It's seriously a standout product. Oh, and Bluetti did give me a discount code to share with you that I'll probably knock off something like about 50 bucks, I think. And that should help at least offset the sales tax a fair amount if you're interested in pulling the trigger on one of these. And per usual, I'll put that discount code along with links where you can find the Elite 200 version 2. And maybe also check out some of Bluetti's other Black Friday deals that they've got going on right now through the end of November. And I'll also put a link to my Google spreadsheet for you if you want to download that and see what kinds of things that this power station can run and how long it can run them. Just keep in mind that you do have to download your own copy of the spreadsheet in order to key in that 2,600 watt inverter and that 2,073 watt hour capacity numbers that this thing has, since I do have the online version locked down. Okay, I think that's a wrap. Hopefully you found something useful or helpful in the video. If you did, please consider clicking on that like button for me. I'd very much appreciate that. And I do sincerely thank you for spending some of your valuable time with me today, and I do hope you'll consider joining me for the next one. Until then, have fun out there.